Welcome to In Confidence, hosted by me, Rosie Downing. In this podcast series, I speak to people who've been on surprising, often bumpy rides in their quest for personal and professional confidence, and to the experts who can help you get there. Sometimes confidence is found in surprising places. A few years ago, writer, dancer and choreographer Bonnie Oddie had a breakout success with a one-woman show about taking her mother to the Dignitas clinic in Switzerland to end her life. Today, Bonnie, who is Bill Oddie's daughter, brings her unique storytelling skills into companies. As you'll have gathered, this episode includes discussion of assisted dying.
The workshops are using people's true stories as like the raw material for learning. And that's learning communication skills, learning how to build engaging narratives, how to deliver those narratives in ways that are kind of creative and unusual. But the beautiful thing about working with people's true stories is that the outcomes are always like really multi-layered and multifaceted, because you're also learning about the actual people, and people, while they're discovering their true stories, are learning what matters to them about their stories and what it feels like to talk about something that you care about, because people tend to care about their own true stories. And it's just a brilliant process of discovery as well.
So you're working with teams.
Yeah.
What's the value? What's the commercial value for the organisations for you to be doing this kind of work?
You always come out of these workshops with a team that then instinctively has much better knowledge of who each other are and what makes each other tick and what each other's skills actually are. So you get a much more cohesive kind of team where you get people's diversity comes out, but their skills, their specific way of doing things comes out. So people are much more confident to use each other as a resource. Yeah. And also for individually, you get people realizing that they are a brilliant resource for their own creative work. So much more resilient, much less afraid of a blank page, much more confidence in their own creativity and their own unique ways of delivering. So you just get a more confident, cohesive team of people.
Yeah. So I've heard of companies putting their money behind, teaching you to tell a business story, but a true story seems like a completely different proposition. Why do you think they're interested in the true element?
I think what is brilliant about true stories is that you know what you're talking about. If you can work with someone and they are discovering the meaning and what matters to them and what actually happened in an experience, the confidence literally grows alongside that exploration. So it's not unlike a sort of, a made up business brief. If you're actually working with a true story, you can go as deep into that as you want. And the sense, that feeling of talking about something that you know about, to actually embody that feeling and understand what that feels like. And to be able to work with something that is limitlessly informed. You know what happened because it happened to you. You know how you feel about it. So it's a really rich raw material to get skills out of.
Yeah, it's very clever because it's essentially teaching people the DNA of storytelling. And what often makes people clam up is not having access to all the information.
Yeah.
So if you're telling a story about yourself, you don't need to worry about that. And then when you get put into that position where you're telling a business story, you have all the skills you've learned through your workshop at your fingertips. Yes, I love it.
And there's also a million ways to tell a story, even a true story. We always tell our stories differently, depending on who we're telling them to, depending on how we're feeling about them at the time. So the context around how to tell a story, even though it's one story, it's a true story, but to explore, how would I tell this story to this audience? How would I tell that story to that audience? How would I tell that story and focus on, any particular value or message or journey that I wanted to share? All those choices bring thinking into awareness, thought process and choice into awareness. And the minute that's in your awareness, you can make those choices based on anything that you're doing. You can transfer that informed exploration into anything that you do, any presentation, anything that you build and share with someone else.
Yeah. So with the people who experience your workshop, how do you see that experience giving them confidence?
It's inherent. People love telling their stories, because when you get that lean in moment, when someone is like, I get you, I understand you, I know what you mean, that is all round affirmation of what you're saying, making sense. That's human connection. And I think confidence comes from connection.
Yes.
Inherently.
If you're listening to this and thinking confidence and communication skills is something you'd love to work on Wednesday, the 15th of April in Soho, I'll be running a confidence and communication skills workshop. I'll be joined by West End director Abby Wright, protege of Alan Rickman and Danny Boyle, and award-winning playwright Nina Siegel, who's an associate writer at the Royal Court. We'll teach you theatre skills to boost your presence, storytelling, and influence. You can find tickets on the Boost website, and I've also put them in the show notes. Companies often want us to show the outcome. What is the outcome? Mm-hmm. And actually what you've just described it's an outcome that you can't really quantify, but it is exponentially useful to an organization. Contagious confidence.
It's transformative.
Yeah. And in fact, many of the clients that I have who are at the top of their game are sitting on similar creative talents that can also be so useful and unlock untold confidence, etc., in their team. So you're absolutely right. Naming out loud the value of these almost unquantifiable skills is really, really important.
It really is. One thing that's so powerful about stories, people that work in advertising know that you sell things powerfully through stories because people attach to it emotionally. And emotion is physical. We feel it. Instead of facts or figures, all the quantifiable stuff, the stuff that actually resonates a little bit deeper and stays with people longer is the emotional stuff. We spend so much time in business trying to, because it's about economy
79%.
Exactly. All those things only matter because they support the things that you can't measure, like happiness or health or a good relationship. My currency is emotion. My currency is communication and a sense of connection, and yet it's a uncountable currency. The actual sort of benefits for people working with true stories is that once you have felt what that feels like, to sit in your integrity and your sincerity and communicate something that you actually know and you actually care about and you actually understand, and to have that response of someone saying, yep, I get it, I understand, I care about it too now, and it's also made me realize something about myself. Once you have felt what that feels like, you can't unfeel it. And you know exactly when you're not doing that. So if you are stood in front of a load of people and you're masking and you're not being honest, and they are feeling it and they're going, I don't believe this person, I don't trust this person, you know the difference because it's embodied. That's what I'm working with.
You've moved from communicating through dance and choreography into telling more stories with words. And there's one story that you are well known for, and that is the story about how your mum asked you and your sister to take her to Switzerland to visit a Dignitas clinic for assisted death. And then you turned that story into an award-winning show. I'm going to say here, one of the funniest stories I've ever heard, which is not what I was expecting given the subject matter.
People discover things about themselves when they tell a true story. And I discovered that I was funny. If you want to tell the story of taking your mother to Dignitas, then people want to hear that bit. Do you know what I mean? They don't want to hear, okay, so 5 years before, happening was they want to hear that bit. So
Yes.
that story was very focused on that bit. When I got to write more into it and around it, I was able to talk about the context, which led me to talk more about relationships between mothers and daughters. And because before Mum went to Dignitas, me and my two daughters were living in the house with her. So there was 3 generations of women living together in this house, which was a kind of a massive story in and of itself. And that was the context that death and choice to die sat within the context of relationships between mothers and daughters. Now, I don't know about you, but most people that have either a mother or a daughter or both, you know, the emotional sort of heritage and legacy that sort of gets passed down.
Yeah.
You know, when you include then and now I'm choosing to die into that, it is like, whoa, okay, you know. So it is fun. I mean, it's funny. It's funny because it's funny because it's true, but it's funny because it's kind of it just hits levels of ridiculous, I think. You know, of like, your mum made you feel a bit guilty. It was like, yeah, she went there, you know, but also there's just a lot of love in it too. It was all written with a lot of love.
Can you tell me the thing that people say is the most ridiculous part of it?
I think maybe part of what makes it feel ridiculous is because we don't talk about death very much in our culture. We, you know, I think we talk about it more now, but there's no strong tradition. And I think that goes with the thing about it's meant to be meaningful. I think that's why we have ceremony, is because it kind of like in times of emotional extremes, it's kind of a rope you can hang on to. It's like a line that you can tells you what to do. So even if emotionally you're kind of being, you know, you're in chaos, there is a kind of way to be. And with Dignitas, there's no we don't have an assisted dying ceremony, you know, and it's a preemptive death. So especially with her diagnosis, because she had Alzheimer's, so she wasn't even in physical pain. It is odd. It's ridiculous. You are like, we don't know how to be.
I've
now.
never had this experience before.
Yeah. And there's no ceremony to hang on to. I wouldn't say I'm terrible at this to the point of like negating sincerity, but I do tend to come at things with a bit of humor when maybe when it's a bit edgy. So I think, a bit of me was like, this is crazy.
Your story has now you've started to develop it, you've developed it, and you've started to explore mothers and daughters. And I think that's what happens in storytelling, is that if you focus on a story, you then start to see other places your attention can go. And for organizations who want to develop critical thinking or creative thinking in their people, True Stories is a really good place to start, because it gives people the confidence to see themselves as deep thinkers.
You've got every bit of information you need. It is inherent within you, and there will always be universality. There will always be something in your story that is universal to other people. They're an incredible resource for discovery and learning.
This experience, has it had a bearing on your confidence? So what you went through with your mum and then turning it subsequently into a story and then a show?
I would say that I had to, you have to dig quite deep. And in that process, I have revealed kind of courage and wisdom and compassion that I didn't know I had. You feel confident to be able to support other people. So there is a certain confidence that comes from that, because you've survived something, or you've been through something, you've understood something. And so there is an inherent confidence that comes with that. But also, it wasn't my choice. It was my mum's choice. And my choice was whether I supported her or not. It was happening either way. And I just had to grapple with what compassion looked like at that time with my mum. Since that time, I would say that I have so many more questions because now it's over. I've kind of got the space. It's safe for me to question and go, how did I feel about that? And what do I believe about that? And it's a really complex, since then it's gone through Parliament. It's gone through the House of Lords where, there's been a whole debate. There's a lot of debates. And all of a sudden, a lot of people who'd never considered assisted dying before, but all of a sudden, many people have really strong opinions on it who have never even thought about it before because now it's a debate. One conviction I have is that life is not an either or. Nothing is ever an either or. I'm quite good at holding conflicting truths, which is another reason why I find true stories such a brilliant thing to work with because, like I say, there's 3,000 ways of telling the same story.
One story, yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of confidence in that sense, I think I'm actually confident in not knowing exactly, how I feel about it. And in terms of confidence of actually writing the story, I would say when I first went to write that story, I was really nervous. And in the first draft workshop, a woman asked me, what would it take for you to give yourself permission to write that story about you? Because when I first wrote that story, I was so concerned about everyone else that I was compromising everything and almost not really telling the story. And again, another brilliant thing of working with a true story is that you do come across your own limitations. You do come across your own censorship and where you're deciding it's okay for you to actually take center stage and where you're not. So that's been a really interesting journey in terms of confidence of actually just giving yourself permission.
Yes. Giving yourself permission to tell your story. And I like what you say about kind of giving yourself permission not to tell other people's parts of the story.
Absolutely.
And that's important. Yeah. So we've talked about your mum.
Yes.
Can we also talk about your dad, who is Bill Oddie?
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a theme that's coming up on this podcast, which is complete coincidence, which is people who have grown up with either of their parents in the public eye. And I wanted to ask you what that's like and what kind of bearing that has on your confidence.
It's a difficult question to answer because obviously it's the only experience of having a father that I've had. So I don't know what it's like not to. And it was a question that would get asked of me a lot when I was younger because he was sort of at the height of his fame when I was little, coming into my teens, and then a bit of a resurgence after that. But when I was very little was when he was kind of very, very popular, and the stuff that he was doing was very popular. And people would always ask me, what's it like to have a famous dad? And I'd be like, I don't know. So at the time I didn't really know. And when you're a kid, you just like, everything's normal, isn't it? Whatever's happening is normal.
Yeah.
I think sort of into my teens and secondary school time, everyone saw me coming. When you've got a famous parent, everyone knows who you are before you know who anyone else is.
Right.
And not only do they know who you are, in that you are Bill Oddie's daughter, but there will also be an assumption that comes with that. Therefore, she must think this about herself, or she must have this kind of attitude, or she must,
Or also she could give me X, Y, or Z.
That one's really obvious.
Yeah.
Like that one's really obvious, when it was always very obvious when people, wanted to know you because of that. And it never really worked anyway. And I think it doesn't really work because I think I was quite an awkward person when I was young. So I think I'm actually a bit of an introvert. And so people always thought that I was just a bit full of myself. Right. And it was just because I was quiet. But because I'm Bill Oddie's daughter, if I'm Bill Oddie's daughter and I'm quiet and I'm not really talking to anyone, it must be because I think everyone's beneath me. But it really wasn't that. It was just a kind of, I'm also the youngest in my family, or I was when I was little. So I'm the observer.
Yes.
I'm the quiet observer.
But you were also the sister of
Yeah.
should we say, famous sister? Your sister was kind of well
Yeah,
known,
she
wasn't
was.
she?
Yeah, she was. Yeah,
So
when I was about 11 or so, she started working as a film actress. So she became, and also just sort of within a community, she was my big sister, and
yeah,
she, everyone kind of knew who she was before they knew who I was, even
yes.
regardless of her, of then going on to the career that she went on to. Some big lives preceding me.
Big characters.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
have a similar experience in that my older sister is or was a ballerina.
right.
So there's something about, and she was much older than me. So by the time I was 7, I had swallowed the idea that you were going to be someone, aka my sister, or you were going to be a bit of a mess, aka me, and that those were the two. I was quite binary.
Options.
Those were the two options. I could not handle that at all because I was so jealous of all the attention she got. Everyone used to ask me, what's your sister doing? And so I used to dine out on all of the exciting things she was doing, but also want people to ask or be interested in me. So I used
Yeah,
to big myself up a lot. And I think
yeah.
that really affected my confidence in terms of how I presented myself. It took me a long time to
Mm.
figure out, a bit like what you were saying about the not knowing. It's okay to not be a somebody. It's okay
Yeah,
just to be
yeah,
you.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it does. You do get a bit of that fear of failure thing because
Mm,
you just feel very exposed. And it's interesting because I've got two daughters now
mhm.
who are not that far. They're just over a year apart,
Irish
which was
twins.
not planned, but that was a shock. But it's interesting being now a mum of that sister dynamic, and how I can see it, and I do feel for my eldest daughter sometimes because she's like, you're such a younger sibling, you
Mm,
so get it, you so get the younger sibling role, and you naturally sort of like align with it,
yeah,
whereas for her being the older sibling, she sort of feels very like
no one
out,
sees her.
yeah, no one understands her in the same way, and I think it's true. I think like the sibling, I don't know what it's like, but I know with when there's two sisters like that, it's such a definitive relationship. It really defines who you are in the world,
Mm,
even a bit more, I would say, than your parents. So I think dad being who dad was one thing, but being the younger sister as well was another powerful thing, just in terms of like where you place yourself, status wise, what space you're willing to take up, kind of thing.
yes.
Going back to my dad, I think one thing that, because I was aware that people were noticing who I am and perhaps being a little bit judgmental about who I am, it did
Mm,
make me quite self conscious. On the one hand, you're kind of arrogant because
hmm.
it's like, well, yeah, my dad is, I do go on TV sets, and I have hung out with quite a lot of famous people, and you know if you're going to be weird about it, like, that's weird, don't be weird.
Hmm.
So there's a kind of arrogance that goes with it, but then also, because of that arrogance, it's like I'm aware of humility as well,
Yeah, yes,
where
because
I'm like, yeah,
you have to present that side of things so that you're managing other people's perception of you.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it is the difference between real like true confidence
Hmm.
that is born from, like I said, sort of integrity and sincerity and knowing something,
Hmm.
um, and sort of that bravado or that arrogance that comes from like actually needing to be something other than
Yes.
what you think you are, kind
Yeah.
of. I think having a famous dad and being a younger sister, and also my mum was a big powerful kind of person within her own world, it just brought a lot of that into awareness for
Mm.
me at quite
Yeah.
a young age.
So I always love to end these podcasts with some practical tips.
Yeah.
And you've talked about accessing your authentic confidence through storytelling.
Mm.
So if somebody wanted just to start now, obviously they need to go to one of your workshops, But if they wanted just to start thinking about that for themselves, where should they start?
There's a lovely thing of just I remember, where you just write I remember, and you could maybe set yourself a task of doing it like 3 or 4 times in the morning, like I remember, and give yourself permission.
Yeah, give yourself permission to remember.
Yeah, and write it down your way. Give yourself permission to tell that story, see what comes out.
Yeah, to own your story.
That's why I call the workshops Your Story Works, because it does. Whatever it does, it always works.
That feels like a perfect place to end the conversation. Bonnie, Oddie, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This podcast is designed to be practical. I want to actively help you boost your confidence. Each episode is accompanied by a short Substack post with a tool or an exercise to help you apply the ideas we've explored in your own life. You can find those by subscribing to In Confidence on Substack. And if you have a question for me or a comment on one of the episodes, or you just want to say hi, you can email dearinconfidence@gmail.com, or you can WhatsApp 07377 231 025. That's all from me. See you next time.